Today we're going to look at standard RI.6.9. And it says, compare and contrast one author's presentation of events with that of another through a memoir written by and a biography on the same person or some examples. Okay, so we're going to look at two different passages on Amelia Earhart today and see what the author's purpose behind those passages are. Okay, so the very first one we have, you'll see that the genre is a biography. It's on Amelia Earhart. The title is Born to Fly, and it's by Anne Randall. And it says, Amelia Earhart didn't always dream of becoming an aviator. Okay, an aviator is someone who flies airplanes. While she had seen airplanes growing up, it wasn't until her early 20s that she realized she was born to fly. When Earhart was 20 years old, she and a friend attended a stunt flying contest. Their fun ended, however, when one of the planes came zooming toward them. In spite of the danger, Earhart stood firm, displaying the same fearlessness that she would continue to show all of her life. This encounter proved to be a sign of things to come. Just a few years later, Earhart found herself flying inside an airplane. On December 28, 1920, pilot Frank Hawks changed Earhart's life by taking her on her first plane ride. It was then that she knew she was meant to be in the air. Earhart attended her first flying lesson just 5 days later, and by 1922, she was already setting records. She became the first woman to fly to an altitude of 14,000 feet. Over the next 15 years, Earhart would continue to make her mark on the record books time and time again, proving that flying was truly in her blood. Okay, so let's go back and let's circle and underline details that help us to understand why and how Amelia Earhart learned to love flying. Okay, well, if I look back, this thing never likes to move. Okay, we see, first of all, that she was fearless, okay? That showed that she wasn't scared to do those things that came with flying. Even in spite of the danger that had come, she was not scared. Then here we see she went on her first plane ride, and then she knew immediately that she was meant to be in the air. Earhart attended flying lessons just 5 days after that. So even after that first plane ride, she was ready to start flying lessons right after. Okay, so the author's purpose, of course, is to inform. Okay, it's giving us facts about Amelia Earhart's life. But it wants to know, how does the author's purpose influence the focus of the text and the details presented? The author wants to focus on the early part of Earhart's life to explain her passion for flying, and she did have a passion for flying, so much that it talked about how it was truly in her blood, that she liked it that much. Which facts has the author presented to show how Earhart's experiences started her on the path to becoming a famous and fearless aviator? And again, an aviator is someone who flies airplanes. Okay, so it wants me to explain the author's purpose. Well, first of all, okay, we just talked about how the author's purpose is to inform. So the author's purpose, and I want to abbreviate, the author's purpose is to inform. Okay, it gave us facts. It told us about Earhart's early life, and how she decided to be a pilot. Okay. For example, the text states I'm going to say the text states, Frank's, right here, Frank Hawks changed Earhart's life by taking her on her first plane ride. And then she began flying lessons just 5 days later. And there is where I would put that information from the text. Okay, Frank Hawks changed her life by taking her on her first plane ride, and then she started flying lessons 5 days later. So that's what the author's purpose was in this passage. Now, we have another passage on Amelia Earhart. Remember, my standard was to compare and contrast, so we have to have two passages to look at. Okay, Earhart on Equality, and this is by Brian Vargas. It says, as a famous female aviator. Okay, notice that we talked about aviator in the last passage, and it's telling me again that she's an aviator right here. Amelia Earhart did much to advance equality for women. In 1928, she became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, and she spent the rest of her life fearlessly. Now, there's that word we just learned about in the first passage. Flying farther and faster. Earhart was first to fly many long, dangerous routes, and she encouraged other women to fly. She championed women in the sciences as a guest professor at Purdue University. She said women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others. Okay, so she was really about women trying things that they were often told they couldn't do, or that men, it was kind of a stereotype that men were the ones to do it. So we're looking at the chart here, and we have Born to Fly, that's the first passage. Then we have Both, and we have Earhart on Equality, and that's this passage. Okay, so there's two facts that I saw immediately that were the same. Okay, that was, let me get my annotation thing here. Okay, so both passages talked about her being an aviator, and that was somebody that flew a plane. We also learned that she was fearless in both passages. Okay, so she wasn't scared. Her fear didn't stand in the way of her doing things. Okay, so then it also told me in both passages that she liked to set records. Okay, so there may be some others, but I'm out of room right here. For me to be able to put it in the both column, it had to say it in both passages. Okay, now let's look back at Born to Fly. Okay, so with yours, you would be able to flip back. I don't want to flip back right here because I don't want to lose what I've written. But we learned in Born to Fly that 1920 was her first airplane ride. Okay, now, does it tell me that in this passage? No. So that's why it's only in the first, in Born to Fly in that column. Okay, then she started flying lessons 5 days after the first plane ride. She began flying lessons. Okay, so it did not tell me that in this passage. That's why it goes only in this first column. Okay, so there are, of course, other things, but I'm out of room there. So let's look at Earhart on Equality. Now that is to go in that column. It can only be mentioned in this passage. Okay, so let's look here. It told me that she was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. That was not in the other passage. She encouraged other women to fly. That was not in the first passage. And then she said right here, women must try to do things as men have tried. Those are 3 things that I would write right here in this column that were not mentioned in the first passage. So looking at that, I've got facts from Born to Fly. I've got facts from Earhart on equality, and then in the middle I have put facts from both articles that the same things were mentioned, like she was an aviator, she was fearless, and then she set records. Those are things that were mentioned in both passages. Both passages had similar content, but they were written by different authors, so of course they said different things. So I was able to compare and contrast 2 different passages on the same topic, and then I was able to write my similarities and differences here.